Hello, my name is Raymond Watt. I am an American English teacher living in Taiwan, and this is my first YouTube video of any kind, so please forgive me for the bad quality, because I know some of you are going to be criticizing the quality of the video too much, and I'm like, dude, this is my first video, cut me some slack. I promise, if I keep making YouTube videos, chances are they're going to be better. I have a great passion for movies, but I've never went to film school, so I don't really have any experience making movies myself. And you're going to be noticing a lot of jump cuts in this video. Like that. And that. So much of this video may feel like a Godard film.
Ce n'est pas ça, Michel. Pourquoi vous êtes triste?
Parce que je suis triste.
C'est idiot.
I just think it's better to film it like that than to have to memorize a long script and try to get it all right on the first take. Now, here's why I'm making this video. Living in Taiwan has given me many opportunities for traveling, and I have always taken full advantage of it, especially during the Chinese New Year holiday where we get 6 days off. In 2015, I stayed in Hong Kong. I even spent an afternoon in Macau. In 2016, me and my Scottish friend Blair traveled across the land of the rising sun, and in 2017, I went to Korea. Notice I didn't say north or south. So let us begin.
And here we go.
Now, my flight to Seoul was very interesting to say the least because it left at around 7:15 a.m. and it takes about a couple hours to get from Taichung, where I live, to Taoyuan Airport. So I decided, you know what? Why not just stay up all night? I packed all my bags, I fooled around on my laptop, and whenever I go on a really long flight, I always have this tradition that the night before I would watch my favorite episode of Seinfeld ever, The Airport. You see, a couple years ago when I flew back from Hong Kong, the airline made a mistake, and I ended up flying business class. So, if I ever get into one of these scenarios, I am going to do the exact same stunt that Jerry did.
I have one seat in first class and one in coach. The price is the same because your flight was canceled.
Oh, well, I'll take the first class.
Jerry,
What?
why should you get the first class?
Elaine, have you ever flown first class?
No.
All right, then. See, you won't know what you're missing. I've flown first class, Elaine. I can't go back to coach. I can't. I won't.
You flew here, coach.
Yeah, that's the point.
All right, fine. I don't care. The plane crashes. Everybody in first class is going to die anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll live.
Of course, today we don't say first class or coach anymore. We say business class or economy class, as if they're two different college majors. So I had my 2-hour flight to Korea. When I arrived at Incheon Airport, I was greeted by lovely ladies all wearing hanboks. Incheon Airport has a reputation of being one of the most efficient airports in the world, so for all of you who typically fly to and from JFK, you must be feeling pretty envious right about now. South Korea has the Winter Olympics in 2018, so I got to see a lot of Olympic mascots in the airport in preparation. Who knows, maybe I'll go back to South Korea next year for it. I remember when I went to Japan how amazed I was when I saw that one can of soda was like 140 yen. Well, in Korea, it's 1,400 won. This is a subway map of the Seoul-Incheon metropolitan area. You see, Seoul and Incheon are like Dallas and Fort Worth, Minneapolis and St. Paul. Like they're so close to each other that they actually share the same subway map. This is just me taking pictures of Incheon from the train. I planned my vacation well in advance, and I decided that the first thing that I was going to see in Korea was the Douglas MacArthur Incheon Landing Memorial. Now, I can't really talk about Korea more without talking about the weather in the winter. You see, my dad gave me this really great book on the Korean War called The Coldest Winter. I absolutely strongly recommend it. But I gotta say, it was not called The Coldest Winter for nothing. So keep in mind, at that point I had gotten maybe 4 hours of sleep, a few hours on the bus and a few hours on the plane. I had to carry this bag of luggage around with me because I hadn't stopped by my hotel yet, and it was absolutely freezing cold. I mean, last year I went to Japan during February, and the weather was a bit nippy, but it was nothing like this. Imagine the worst New York winter. That's basically what it's like in Seoul. But nonetheless, I feel I had to go out of my way to honor General Douglas MacArthur. It's quite touching how people in Korea still honor them to this day, because if you know anything about the Korean War, you know how crucial the Incheon landing was. It was like Korea's equivalent of D-Day. It completely turned the tides. When you really think about it, there aren't many American movies made about the Korean War. However, Korea makes a Korean War movie like every year or so, it seems. In fact, just a few years ago, there was this Korean War film called Operation Chromite, where Liam Neeson played Douglas MacArthur. I haven't seen it, but it was supposed to be a big box office success. Here's a dedication to all the UN countries that helped Korea, though by UN countries I mean mostly America. Man, I gotta say, they just don't make men like him like they used to. He wasn't perfect, but I do feel like countless people in the world this day owe a ginormous debt to him. If you're ever in Korea, this is a great place to learn about Korean War history, especially the Incheon landing, though it's not quite as impressive as the Korean War Memorial we'll see on day 3, because if you're impressed by museums, wait until you get a load of that one. Before I went to my hotel, I went to the top of the memorial, which has a very nice view of the Incheon skyline. Now, I took a cab to the nearest subway station, and thank God that I had this, because I do not know a single word of the Korean language. Like, I think somebody told me that thank you is 감사합니다, but it's very likely that I just pronounced it wrong. I mean, last year when I was in Japan, I at least knew domo and arigato and gojira, but here I did not know a single word of the Korean language. So when you're ever in a country and you don't know a single word of their language, a smartphone is always a lifesaver. Now this is the Dongdaemun Gate at night, which was not terribly far from where my hotel was, where I slept like a baby. Just so you know, on Facebook I made 6 different albums dedicated to my trip to Korea. 1 album from each day, and 4 of those album titles have puns with the word Seoul in them. I guess you could call myself a Seoul survivor. Boo! Yeah, you better get used to them. Now, once I got a good night's sleep, I woke up and put on 2 layers of pants this time, and went my way to Gwanghwamun Square in Seoul. It's sort of like their equivalent of the National Mall in DC, or Tiananmen Square in Beijing. This is a statue of the legendary King Sejong, a very famous king in Korea. He is famous for fighting off Japanese raiders, creating the Korean alphabet, and encouraging advancements in scientific technology. Today he is on the 10,000 won bill. This is Admiral Lee Sun-shin. This guy is like the George Washington of South Korea, a huge national figure like that. Military historians compare him with Admiral Nelson in terms of skill as a naval commander. He's famous for his victories against the invading Japanese in the Imjin War in the late 16th century. This was also like a King Leonidas 300 moment for the Koreans, because Admiral Lee Sun-shin only had 13 ships at one point, compared with 133 Japanese naval ships, yet he still managed to destroy like 30 of them without damaging a single ship of his own. He did this all without naval training too, and yet he was one of the very few naval commanders in world history to go undefeated. And Wikipedia said he commanded at least 23 naval battles in his lifetime. So needless to say, Admiral Lee Sun-shin remains extremely popular among Koreans today. These are the turtle ships that Lee Sun-shin used to fight the Japanese. However, I'm going to teach you much more about these ships later in the video when I went to the Korean War Museum. You want Korean War history? That is where you go. They had this cool little museum nearby, though for me it was just a great place for me to charge my phone because I needed it to be charged. This area of Seoul is very famous for its peaceful political protests. Now, I don't know how many of you follow international news recently, but their former leader, Park, was extremely unpopular, and that's an understatement. You see, she was supposedly very corrupt. There was this incident, for example, a few years ago, where a bunch of high school students, like hundreds of them, died on a ferry trip, and she didn't respond right away because she was too busy getting her Botox done. Like, that's just one of the many things wrong with her. But she's in jail now, so Korea knows how to take care of their corrupt politicians. Throughout that day, I saw pretty much nothing but palaces, and the one you see in the background is called Gyeongbokgung, which is the main palace. All the palaces you'll see here were built at the start of the Joseon dynasty in 1394. However, they have all been destroyed twice, both by the Japanese. The first being at the Japanese invasions of Korea in the late 16th century, and the second being in 1911, when Korea was occupied by Japan in the decades before World War II, and the Japanese just destroyed all of it, pretty much. There were a few surviving buildings, but most of what you see here has been recreated relatively recently. Of course, no palace would be complete without its own versions of the guards from Buckingham Palace. What's cool about this place is, for free, you can rent some clothes and dress up in the height of Joseon fashion, and walk around the courtyard. As I edit this video, this profile pic has 84 likes. I have never had a profile pic that has gotten close to that. Not even my Hong Kong Bruce Lee pic. Right now, I'm dressed as a palace guard who would stand on the wall behind me to defend Seoul against invaders like the Mongols.
You Mongolian! Don't you break down my wall! Get out of here! You Mongolian!
Gyeongbokgung overall has a real forbidden palace in Beijing feel. It has a lot of beautiful buildings, a lot of temples, of course. And it wouldn't be a palace without a throne room. Now, coming up, we have the Gyeonghongru Pavilion, where they had very important state banquets. You notice the frozen water because it was that cold. Like, it just makes you want to go ice skating towards that building. And here's another pavilion called the Gyeonghwangjeong Pavilion, built on a man-made island. That bridge leading up to the pavilion has been destroyed during and rebuilt after the Korean War. And it always looks beautiful, but it looks different depending on which season you visit it, like the Golden Pavilion in Kyoto. Now we're about to visit a sad and infamous chapter in Korean history. I didn't go inside because the line seemed a bit long, but everybody there was honoring the late Empress Myeongsong. What happened to her, I'm about to show you in this educational but darkly humorous video I found on YouTube. The fallout from her assassination eventually led to the end of the Joseon dynasty and the start of a very oppressive rule by the Japanese until the end of World War II. Though Empress Myeongsong remains a very popular figure in Korean pop culture today with numerous movies, TV shows, and musicals. As I walked to the area behind Gyeongbokgung, I stumbled across the presidential residence. I looked it up on Wikipedia and I found out that it's actually called the Blue House. Fancy that. I then took a stroll to that nice tall pagoda you see on your left, and I saw a whole bunch of people celebrating Chinese New Year, or more precisely, the Year of the Rooster. Around this area, you get a little feel of what Korea was like a few decades ago. You see like some nice shops, the inside of a classroom, and I really especially like the movie posters of Star Wars and Casablanca. While walking to the next palace, I went through the Bukchon Hanok village, a very old traditional area filled with alleyways, old restaurants, and lots of interesting street food. Unfortunately, most of these restaurants were closed because of the Chinese New Year holiday, but I still got to experience much of its interesting culture and food. Like, take this weird candy snack where you get a bunch of these fruit balls, and this guy actually has like a blowtorch that freezes them to that temperature.
I'm afraid that my condition has left me cold to your pleas of mercy.
I also found something that tasted really good that you can't really find in Taiwan, but you can find in America. Twizzlers! Granted, the Twizzlers in Korea aren't quite the same as in America, but they taste just as good, in fact, maybe a bit better. I mean, seriously, Taiwan, you really need to move on that. Now, this is the Cheongdeokgung Palace, a place renowned for its beauty, and is considered a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It was basically a resting place for the Joseon kings. For me, this part of Seoul really does have a Kyoto feel, because here you see a bunch of Korean women renting hanboks for the day. Just like in Kyoto, you saw a bunch of women renting kimonos for a day. It's like you're traveling back in time. It's really neat. I actually really lucked out that day because my original plan was to buy this ticket that covered all of the palaces in the area, But on Chinese New Year, not just on Chinese New Year, but on that one specific day, it was free access to all of the palaces, so it saved me quite a little bit of money. What's interesting about this palace is that, according to Wikipedia, unlike the Gyeongbokgung Palace, the buildings here blended with the natural topography, such as in the old Three Kingdoms period. Overall, the Joseon kings decided that this palace was their all-time favorite. My last stop for the day was the Jeongmyo Shrine, which was a Confucian shrine dedicated to the Joseon royalty, and also another UNESCO World Heritage Site. In this area, you see, they still perform Confucian rituals to this day, and is the longest building in Korea of traditional design. I had to look this up, but this is a statue of Lee Sung-jae, who was a South Korean patriot who was a martyr against the Imperial Japanese. After a long day of historic sightseeing, I met up with some colleagues in Gangnam, and yes, this is the Gangnam style Gangnam. It's a very famous, wealthy district in Seoul, and I'm not going to be playing that song because, well, I absolutely despise that song. Seriously, South Korea, you like this guy so much, you can keep him.
I'm a soul man. I'm a soul man. I'm a soul man. I'm a soul man.
Oh, hi there. Now, on day 3, I spent the majority of the day at the Korean War Museum. Like my entire stay in Korea, it was very cold, but it was the one day where I actually remember it flurrying a little bit. Here we have the Statue of Brothers, a very moving image of a brother from the north and a brother from the south holding each other in unity. Here we have an even moving effigy that's not only a dedication to the brave heroes who fought in the war, but is also a very vivid depiction of the suffering and plight of the Korean people. Here we have another monument in dedication and a plaque with the immortal words, "Freedom is not free." No true words I don't think have ever been spoken. The museum is an impressive enough building, but what's even more impressive are the amount of toys that are kept around the premises. And sorry, Kim Jong-un, you don't get to play with any of these. Though it kind of makes you think, with all the stuff here, they probably have enough to just simply invade North Korea. Guess it's not that simple, though. All of what you see here comes from every single era in Korean's modern war history. Not just the Korean War, but like Vietnam War and much more recent than that. I believe this is a dedication to all the Koreans that lost their lives in the war. After a nice stroll outside, I went inside, and what's really cool about this museum is that it's free. The government sponsors it, kind of like the Smithsonian in DC. And you're actually allowed to take pictures inside, unlike some other museums. Now, the very first thing we see in this museum is this very solemn entrance hall where there's a beautiful art piece dedicated to the people who died in Korea's war history, which you can imagine is quite a lot. Now, keep in mind, it's called the Korean War Memorial, but that doesn't mean it's just exclusive to the Korean War. In fact, if everything you see in this museum, I would say maybe a third or half of it is dedicated to the Korean War. It actually details all of Korea's war history. The history of humankind is the history of war, a statement that I feel perfectly sets the tone for this museum, because Korea today definitely believes that old Roman soldier's philosophy that if you want peace, you better prepare for war. Here we have beautiful miniatures depicting what the landscape must have looked like during the Three Kingdoms period in Korea. We have ancient weaponry, I believe, from Korea's Neolithic age. Now, here's a little crash course in Korea's early history. The first Korean kingdom was Go-Joseon, but the Han Chinese eventually defeated them, and what was left eventually became the Three Kingdoms, which are Goguryeo, Baekje, and Silla. Silla would conquer Baekje, and allied with the Tang dynasty in China, they would conquer Goguryeo as well, which eventually led to a division in Korea, a North and South period, and it would not be the last time that would happen, of course. It was eventually all unified and became the Goryeo dynasty, and what's very interesting is that we get the word Korea from Goryeo, kind of like how we got China from the Qin dynasty. Here we see some more artifacts, typical of what you'd find in the museum. You see a lot more old weaponry. Now, remember those turtle ships I told you about earlier?
And perhaps the most lethal of all such inventions came not from the West, but the East. The ship was designed to act as a battering ram. 400 tons of boat, powered by 80 oarsmen, would crash into enemy ships. But in order to withstand such collisions, its design was critical. The ship's crew and rowers were shielded inside the vessel. Outside, the turtle ship was clad in iron plating. And these spikes were not just for decoration.
Japanese ships would approach the Korean ships at high speed,
and the Japanese would jump on the deck to kill the Korean soldiers. This was because their ships were much higher in the water. In order to prevent this happening, spikes were nailed to the roof.
Each plate carried a 2-foot spike that would impale enemy invaders who dared to attempt a boarding. But the spikes were not its only defense. Mounted on the front of the destroyer were the gaping jaws of a majestic dragon, yet this was no decorative figurehead. Ancient stories claim that contained within its mouth was a deadly secret weapon.
The front part of the turtle ship was designed as a dragon head with a mouth which served as a gun port, and a small cannon of mythical power was placed there. A projector was also installed that could release dense toxic smoke generated by burning a mixture of sulfur and saltpeter.
The dragon head was an early chemical weapon. It had the potential to deliver poison gas at an enemy. This predated the use of mustard gas in World War I by more than 300 years, and began the technology of chemical warfare, a terrifying military option to this day. But poison gas is only effective if the soldier can direct it at the enemy, away from his own troops.
If we think about the use of gas, say, in the First World War, obviously it was a very, very dangerous technique. It only needed the wind to change, and the gas could actually affect the people who were trying to deploy it rather than the enemy. So it is a risky stratagem. Right, I've got one of the little chargers here. I'm going to light this, pop him in the pot, put the lid back on fairly quickly, and then hopefully we should get some smoke.
At first, the smoke lingers around the head. This would be lethal for attacking troops. But then the wind picks it up.
The assumption is with something like this that it was projecting the smoke a considerable distance. Well, if you try blowing anything in air, you can't blow it more than probably about 10 feet at most. So really it was just a way of getting this stuff into the air and dispersing it. But I think that given the right kind of manoeuvrability of these turtle ships, it probably was a viable option. And what we have to remember is these guys were heavily outnumbered, and anything that would give them an advantage or that would save their culture and their civilization and their country was something that they would fight very hard to realise.
If the turtle ship captains had been able to position themselves upwind of the enemy, the poison gas could have been delivered without the Korean commanders killing their own troops. The use of toxic gas remained at the mercy of the wind until the delivery of gas by mortar in the trenches of World War I.
Yeah, let's see one of these dinky ships take on one of those floating tanks. Korea had many advancements in military technology. Like China, they had gunpowder, and this was also very effective in fighting off enemies like the Japanese. At this point in the museum, we are now approaching more modern times. In 1876, the Empire of Japan made Korea sign a trade deal with them, but this is one of those imperialist trade deals that was extremely unfair to Korea and only benefited Japan. As I moved to the second floor, I noticed the interior has sort of an Air and Space Museum-like feel. We see a lot of ammunition, some artillery, and a communist tank. Now this was Kim Il-sung's actual limo, a gift from Stalin, and this was Syngman Rhee's limo, a gift from Eisenhower. Syngman Rhee was kinda like the Chiang Kai-shek to Kim Il-sung's Mao. As you probably figured, Korea was in extremely harsh circumstances in the 1950s, and this part of the museum teaches you how Korea went from being one of the poorest countries in the world to one of the richest. How is this miracle possible? Well, a few things. There was the liberalization of the economy, but there was also foreign currency from places like West Germany and the Middle East, and government projects like the Seoul-Busan Expressway. They also sent troops to South Vietnam during the war, thus promoting industrialization in their home country. Their economic recovery is known as the Miracle on the Han River. Now we get to the part of the Korean War Museum that's actually about the Korean War. Now, remember when I told you about this book? I have a feeling the author who wrote this book probably spent several hours walking around this museum. June 25th, 1950. The day the North invaded the South. Here we have the Three Stooges. The Soviet Union, of course, gave assistance to the North, and Red China would provide a lot of troops later. And these communists certainly lived up to their reputation. Here we have a simulation of the fighting that went on during the war. But what was really amazing to me is that some of these Korean pilots had to manually drop the bombs because their plane couldn't do it themselves. It was obviously a time of much social upheaval in Korea. Young men were fighting the communists. Cold War tensions were greatly heating up. There wasn't a single part of the country that wasn't touched by war, destruction, or famine. All of this is still relevant today because, well, it never ended. The 3-year Korean War ended with an armistice, not a peace treaty, which means North and South Korea are still technically at war to this day. But South Korea today remembers when the war was very hot, and it is very thankful of America and all the other countries that helped defend it from the North, and still defend it. Here is where people at the museum can leave messages to not just relatives who are fighting or have fought in the war, but relatives from the other side, from the North, that still haven't been reunited yet. Of course, America wasn't the only country in the UN forces, and this whole wing is dedicated to all the countries that served in the Korean War, and I'll make a list right now. This exhibit shows how people were educated during the Korean War. Now, this part of the museum I thought was very interesting because before I even walked in, I had absolutely no idea that there were Koreans who fought in the Vietnam War. I mean, you learn something every day. This is a recreation of the axe murder incident, but I'll tell you more about that when I get to the DMZ. While the vast majority of the museum focuses on Korea's military past, this one part focuses on Korea's military future and how the soldier of the future would look. After spending several hours at the Korean War Memorial, me and friends went to this very interesting World War II style restaurant, where I asked the waiter, "How's the Korean food in this restaurant?" Living in Taiwan has given me a great love for Korean style fried chicken, and here I got to experience the actual authentic thing for the first time, and I gotta say, it was just as great as I dreamed it would be. After dinner, me and my friends explored Seoul some more, went out in the town for a little bit, had some nice pizza. But one thing I discovered that was awesome was, yep, Taco Bell. They don't have Taco Bell in Taiwan, so I was craving Taco Bell my entire stay in Korea. This is a CVS store, the Korean equivalent of a 7-Eleven or a Family Mart. We spent the rest of the night enjoying the Seoul nightlife. But before we move on to day 4, I have one question to ask. What kind of store only sells condoms? Now, for this day, me and my friend really went back in time. On day 4, me and my friend Steve spent the whole day at the Korean Folk Village. We had to take a bus there from Gangnam. No! The village was located in a suburb of Seoul called Yongin. This place is essentially a living museum that puts on display aspects of traditional Korean life and culture. It's kind of like the episode of South Park where the kids went on a field trip to that place where everything was supposed to be 1864, only it was much more fun. I guess you could say we did have a super fun time. Now, keep in mind, this whole place was built in the 1970s, but it does do a good job of recreating what life was like in the Joseon dynasty. It was also interesting for me visiting because when I was a kid, one of my favorite computer games was Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? And in that game, if you ever go to South Korea, you'll be sent to this specific location, the Korean Folk Village itself. This was the first time I've experienced snow in like 3 years because it really doesn't snow in Taiwan except maybe the high mountains. And it was so great just to get out of the big city, just to witness a winter wonderland. It's just so beautiful. Next to the village, they have a very nice amusement park and this recreation of a European style village. The whole area looked absolutely stunning. Although, I do have to say, that has to be the ugliest exterior of an art museum I've ever seen. Here they have probably the only amusement park I've ever seen that's actually open during the winter. Gaze upon this beautiful frozen river. As beautiful as it is, if we came during the springtime, we probably could get ferry rides across it. Because of all the old looking buildings and everything, they like to film a lot of period pieces here. A lot of popular Korean films and Korean dramas. This may start feeling a little redundant, but here is some more old-looking, beautiful Korean architecture. Here's a little place where you can write your signature, and I decided to write my name in Chinese for the first time in a long time. My Chinese name is Wu Ruiying. I have no idea how common a name that is, but that's the one I picked. Here is a recreation of what a rich man in the Joseon dynasty's house would look like. You have your essential courtyard and a door with insignia on it. As we walk past some more beauty, we played an old traditional game that involves throwing sticks. Alright, let's do this. Okay.
shy. Alright, let me give this a go.
After looking at more redundantly redundant beautiful buildings, me and my friend came across a very nice tea shop with delicious tea complete with a beautiful little courtyard. This is what an old oven looks like. Here's a beautiful little winter waterfall. And then we walked inside this little building where we saw murals depicting vignettes of everyday Joes in life, which are included but not limited to cooking, sewing, farming, and praying. Here we have a recreation of an old Korean hut, and we also see what the best of Korean winter has to offer. I mean, seriously, it's like Korea is the Vermont of Asia. It's just that beautiful. We walked to the north of the village where we saw a marketplace and a nice cafeteria. I had some interesting food, but I had to eat fast because I had to go down in time to see the equestrian martial arts show. I saw some guy doing some cool stunts, but this is the real attraction.
Oh my god. Oh wow. Whoa.
지금 받은 건물을 이용하여 집단을 대여하도록 하겠습니다. 준비하시고 하나, 둘, 셋. 실제 건물 이용하여 이렇게 말 위에서 움직이는 기술 모든 동작의 기본이 되는 기술입니다. 자, 굉장히 쉬워 보이시죠? 그러나 실제로 말을 타보면 말 위에서 움직인다는 게 아주 어렵다는 걸 알 수가 있는데요. 말과의 간격도 맞아야 되고요.
와우.
자, 여러분, 이럴 때 박수가 나집니다. 와우. 그러니까 멋있다고 생각하면 감탄사를 와우. 그러니까 여러분들의 박수와 함께 동작을 완성하도록 할게요. 자, 준비하시고 하나, 둘, 자.
Wow. Wow. That was awesome.
이렇게 박수를 쳐주시면 우리 많이들이 박수 소리에 따라 자발 위에서 360도 회전을 다시 많이 올라타는 굉장히 고난이도 기술을 보여드리고 있습니다. 적들이 순간적으로 위협을 가했을 때 이런 기술을 사용한다고 하네요.
Wow.
이어가 보도록 하겠습니다. 우리 사람들은 저 기창으로 멧돼지를 맞춰 본다고 하네요. 못 맞추는 사람은 엄청 부끄러울 것 같습니다. 멧돼지가 어딨냐고요? 반대편에 있습니다. 우리 사람들 멧돼지를 향하여 준비하시고 두근 발사.
Wow.
작들이 공격을 하면 첫 번째 머리를 말 밑으로 숙여서 이렇게 피합니다.
와우.
자, 그래도 적들이 쫓아오면서 공격을 하면요, 두 번째 머리를 말 옆으로 이렇게 누워서 피한다고 하네요. 그러면 반대편에서 쏘는 기창을 맞지 않겠죠? 두 가지의 댐핑 기술을 하니까요. 그렇습니다. 한 번만 더 여러분들과 박수를 치면서 즐겨보도록
Well, they hit you. They get compensated.
자, 준비하시고 자. 여러분들의 박수와 함께 두 번째 화살 다시 한번 두근 발사.
Nice.
우리 사람들 굉장히 잘 쏘네요. 세 번째
More of the arrows over here.
다시 한번 두근 발사.
Wow.
우리 사람들 멋진 세레모니 갑니다. 앞에다가 잡고요.
Whoa, nice.
이어다가도 잡고. 이러면 말과 함께 신나게 달려볼게요. 우리 사람들 여유롭습니다. 아주 즐거운 시간이에요. 너무 즐거워서 미칠 것 같은데 마지막 떨어져 보아냐. 마지막 열심히 달려야 되는데요.
poor guy.
마지막 사람 아무래도 힘들어 보입니다. 인생이 이런 거겠죠.
Man.
여러분들께서 응원의 박수를 보내주시면
Gotta take a shortcut. You gotta take a shortcut, you know?
잡았어요. 사실 내가 진짜 많은 게 많이 없어요. 자, 말 위에서 요가는요, 균형 감각을 좋게 하는데 실제로 도움이 된다고 합니다. 우리 여자들의 멋진 요가 시범이었네요.
Wow. Whoa.
세 번째 단어는요.
Wow.
자, 우리 사람들 많이 올라타 볼까요? 첫 번째 단어. 두 번째 단어. 이어서 세 번째 단어까지.
Tandem horse.
과연 성공할 수? 아, 박수가 없다고?
Oh, I missed.
자, 우리 마지막 단어까지.
Yes. Whoa. Oh, I missed it. He got on.
우리 세 번째 단원이 말 위에 올라가고요. 이어서 네 번째 단원까지 말 위로 올라갑니다. 우리 단원들 준비되나요? 좋아요. 준비하시고 하나, 둘, 셋. 하늘로 올라가 볼게요.
Wow.
우리 단원들이 날
Yeah.
위로
Oh, time for him to get up. Oh!
갑니다.
Wow.
자, 우리 세연이가 세 번 많이 말했어요. 한 번 해드릴게요.
Yeah. Wow.
네, 여러분들의 박수 덕분에 공연이 안전하게 끝났습니다. 진심으로
Wow.
감사의 말씀 드리겠습니다.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
We walked around the beautiful area some more. I also experienced an old Joseon Dynasty punishment.
Thank you, sir. May I have another? Thank you, sir. May I have another? Thank you, sir. May I have another?
Though it's better than being locked up like this guy. Here we have a Korean play that was going on. Throughout the remainder of our stay at the Korean village, me and Steve basically walked around these recreations of old houses. I mean, the thing is, it was just so beautiful. I had a hard time finding out which pictures I should get rid of because I just felt like I took so many of them. It's crazy, you know? I really hope you all enjoyed this stay at the Korean village. We took a bus from the village to Suwon and then took a train to Seoul Station because we wanted to go up to Seoul Tower. We went up there by cable car because it was too darn slippery and icy to climb up the mountain. The line to the cable car was definitely worth it because not only did we get to see Seoul Tower way up close and get to go inside, but we got to see a great 360 view of the nighttime skyline of Seoul. The area around Seoul Tower is a very cool place to be. There's a lot of great restaurants, gift shops, etc. It sort of reminded me a little bit of the Peak in Hong Kong, only as great a skyline view as the Peak was, it doesn't have a great 360 view like this one does. I remember being a little bit disappointed that the American burger place that we were planning on going to was closed, but in the end that didn't really mean anything because I found a place that was so much better. It's called Ho Siggy. When I looked it up, I couldn't find any other locations, so I don't think it's a chain restaurant, but it has some absolutely delicious Korean-style fried chicken. Me and my friend Steve, we basically splitted these two dishes right there. It was so good, you can get some fried chicken and listen and watch K-pop. While the K-pop girls are certainly nice to look at, I can't say that the music itself is my cup of tea. I mean, if you're into K-pop, I'm not judging you at all. I mean, I know it has a very big cult following in America. It's just the thing is, I have grown to really appreciate Korean culture. I mean, I love Korean movies, I love Korean food, but their music has some things to be desired. And that delicious fried chicken dinner was just preparation for the eventful day we'd have tomorrow. The moment we've all been waiting for. Now, this is the DMZ, the Demilitarized Zone. the border between North and South Korea. Now, I am extremely grateful for this trip because I had to book it at least a month in advance, and it cost a good bit of money too. And the worst part is, DMZ trips are known to cancel like that because of tensions between the North and the South, and there's no refunds either, so I am extremely grateful that it did not get canceled on this vacation. This was our view of the border from the bus, and of course we all know who lives behind that fence, don't we? Our first stop was Imjin-gak, a resort with many monuments in dedication to the Korean War, along with many restaurants and an observation deck. You don't see any North Korean buildings from here, but you do see the land into North Korea, which is still interesting and eerie nonetheless, especially with all the snow on the ground. This is the Bell of Peace, and what we have here is the ruins of an old locomotive that was used during the Korean War. It would send supplies from North Korea. Notice the thousands of bullet holes on it. It's supposed to be the last train to come from North Korea, and today is a solemn reminder of the horrors of the Korean War. And we are standing on the Freedom Bridge, where 13,000 POWs were returned after the Korean War, and today it is a place where many people of Korea can write letters to their loved ones that are still on the other side. The tour bus then took us to our next stop on the DMZ. You are strongly advised not to go past this fence because they do have mines that tend to blow up if you step on them. Where we were about to go was the only part of the DMZ that you couldn't take pictures. This was a long tunnel that was dug by North Korea for an invasion, and it was discovered by the South in the 1970s. Sure, it was kind of cool in theory to go down there, but you needed to wear a hard hat, otherwise you'd keep hitting your head. Because if I didn't wear a hard hat, I'd probably suffer a serious injury. And it was so short and cramped and just very claustrophobic. Not the most fun I've had on the trip. Now this next stop was much more fun. That is North Korea, my friends. I'm sorry for the bad quality of these photos, but it was a very cloudy day and my camera phone can only zoom in so far, but it was quite a sight to behold. And also, I tried to get it on audio, but the quality was so bad you couldn't really hear it anyway. But they were blasting Korean communist propaganda to the max, and we were all there to listen to it. You can't really see it in any of these pictures, but to the right you have a Korean propaganda village, or a Potemkin village as it's often called, and to the left you see an actual village. And if you actually zoom in far enough, if you ever go to one of those binocular things where you put a coin in, you could actually see real North Korean people living there. It's quite amazing. Our next stop was Dorasan Station, a very interesting place that I didn't even realize was part of the tour. South Korea hopes to build a transcontinental railroad that would go all the way from Seoul to London. But of course, for that to happen, you're gonna have to go through North Korea, with a nice stop in Pyongyang. But the weird thing is, people there were acting like unification between North and South might seriously happen in our lifetime. They use the word when, not if. And if it happens, and I hope it does, I can proudly say that I was at Dorasan Station before unification happened. The place, of course, has a very nice gift shop. The only place in Korea where I could find Dr. Pepper was at the North Korean border, go figure. But what really piqued my interest was this, wine from North Korea. So by buying it, I may have inadvertently contributed to North Korea's nuclear program. But anyway, let's see how it tastes. Now. Alright, Kelsey, do you want to hold this? Sure. Face on me. Alright, everyone. Alright, look at me. Alright, me and my friend Steven, we went to the DMZ along with these nice people, Chris and Kelsey. Kelsey, you may turn around and introduce yourself. Alright, we went, there was a very interesting gift shop. You could actually buy this nice bottle of wine, right? Now, I don't usually like wine. In fact, I don't even like the best wines from France. Well, this wine is from North Korea. I repeat, this wine is actually from North Korea. It's called Kangi San Moroso. It has an interesting smell. I'm just going to take one sip of it, and I want Kelsey to record my reaction to it. In fact, there's some Korean guys over there watching me too.
I think we're all excited, Raymond.
Okay, can you hold this until we can do it?
It's too excited. Just
That's pretty tough.
the Koreans are good at
Yeah, that totally looks like wine to me. It looks
That is
more
why
like, it looks more like stale apple cider to me.
Probably tastes like stale apple cider.
Alright,
I'm gonna drink this.
Alright, and remember,
This cost $1.
and this
12%.
This costs like the equivalent.
I'm having a good time.
Yep. This costs like 10,000 won, which is like 10 American dollars. Now, remember, if anybody watching, no cursing because I might post this on Facebook and I have a lot of relatives. Alright, so me trying North Korean wine.
Success.
Can't say it's good, but I don't like wine in general, so. Want to take a try? Sure. Well, I mean, I don't like wine in general, so I don't know the difference between good wine and bad wine.
Oh, it's like got chunks.
It doesn't taste like wine. That tastes like rice wine.
Why is it chunky wine?
Remember, no language, alright? Because I want to post this. Oh, that was a big gulp. Any thoughts?
Go home.
It's kind of like vinegary, you know?
It's just like awful rice wine.
Yeah, I noticed this in it. Like, don't worry, I'm sure it's not, like, dangerous. Otherwise, I wouldn't be selling it to the public. Alright, so, that was it. Do I recommend this? No, not really. I mean, you could buy it just for the sake that you drink North Korean wine. Oh, yeah, that is soju. That is very cheap, and it's the drink of choice in Korea. Everyone enjoy this? Because this is the difference between a free capitalist society and an oppressive communist society. Keep that in mind, alright? Main difference, alright? And to paraphrase John F. Kennedy, I am a soju person, not a North Korean wine person.
I don't know that
It was paraphrased from Ich bin ein Berliner, like I am a Berliner, only like I am a soju drinker. Alright, so, do I recommend it? No, not really, just stick to soju. After Dorasan Station, we went back to Injingak to have a nice lunch. Now, the lunch was pretty decent, although to be fair, I never really had a taste for kimchi. I know a lot of people love it, but I just think it's okay, you know? The tour bus then took us to Panmunjom, our final and most important stop on our DMZ tour. This village is home to the Joint Security Area, or JSA for short. It's where the North and South stand face to face. We were given a nice briefing, and a cool US Army soldier was the tour guide. There was a nice little museum about the history of the JSA. Now, remember the axe murder incident I told you about? It happened in 1976. One day, a few US soldiers were ordered to cut down a tree that was blocking the UN building. However, North Korean guards then attacked them, claiming that that tree was planted by Kim Il-sung. 2 Americans died in this attack and all hell broke loose, but luckily no full-scale war happened. Then our guide took us outside to see the actual compound. In those light blue buildings, they have actual negotiations between North and South. The ROK, or South Korean guards, like to do their taekwondo poses while staring North Korea in the face. Now, do you see that man standing in front of that door to the left? Do you really see him? Do you know who he is? That is a North Korean guard. He probably has a name, but the people there call him Bob. They actually let us go inside one of these blue rooms where the North and South have negotiations. They let you take pictures and pose with the ROK guards. Now, they let you walk to the other side of the room, which is where I took this picture. That means I technically stepped foot in North Korea. You have a South Korean guard to the left and a North Korean guard to the right. It's pretty easy to tell them apart. I must say, my trip to the DMZ is something that I will never forget. It was quite an experience of a lifetime. Though, truth be told, it wasn't nearly as nerve-wracking as I thought it was going to be. I guess that's maybe because the people there do a great job of keeping us safe. Because of them, a war between North and South Korea is about as likely as a war between North and South Dakota. The bus took us to downtown Seoul, where we saw Seoul City Hall. Now, remember that corrupt former president of Korea, Park, I told you about? Well, believe it or not, she actually does have her defenders, and they were all protesting her impeachment right here in this square. They seem to be pretty decent people. In fact, there was this one guy who gave me a South Korean flag and then took my picture, so I thought that was kind of interesting. It just so happens we were near Gwanghwamun Square at the time, and guess what we found? Another palace! This palace is called Deoksu-gong. It's a palace that was inhabited by members of the Joseon royal family, and don't get me wrong, it was very beautiful, but I feel like at this point, you see one Korean palace, you've seen them all. Still a nice place to walk around though. Afterwards, we started celebrating our last full night in Korea with a trip to the Myeongdong Night Market. And I really gotta say, Korean street food is the best street food in the whole world. It tasted so good. I just want to eat nothing but that for the rest of my life. And no, this is not dog meat.
Well, you know, it's not a myth.
they do eat dogs.
Though in all honesty, eating dog meat is much more common in other places of Asia, like Vietnam. Taiwan recently became the first country in Asia to ban eating dogs and cats. So that concludes my last full day in Korea, but stay tuned for the rest of the presentation where I did some last minute sightseeing before leaving back to Taiwan.
So long, farewell, I'll be there saying goodnight. I hate to go and leave this pretty sight.
You know, I had such a great time narrating this movie, but my voice is getting a little rough right now, so I need to take a break. So I am going to show you the rest of my pictures in the form of a montage. So I made my way to Incheon Airport. This is the line I had to wait in, and this is my Hello Kitty ticket. And that was my trip to Korea. I really hope you enjoyed my movie. I worked really hard on it, and this is my first video, so please send me as much feedback as possible. I don't care if it's positive or negative, because I really want this to be an awesome movie, and I want to keep making more. So in order for me to do that, I really need as much reviews and feedback as I possibly can. You've all been such a great audience, and I will see you soon.